Welcome to the premiere of this Psalm Library release, Psalm 46, A River, written by Kit Fox and Reverend Dr. Paul Elliott. The Psalm Library is one of the many initiatives at the Center for Worship Leadership where we equip and encourage songwriters, leaders of worship, preachers, and tech directors with gospel-rooted resources and experiences from the Lutheran theological tradition. The Psalm Library pairs theologians and songwriters to resource the singing of psalms in worship, which connects us to the tradition of the ancient church, and even more importantly, to Christ. We hope you enjoy the presentation of Theology of Psalm 46, followed by the release of the new song, A River. On behalf of the Center for Worship Leadership at Concordia University, Irvine, thank you for joining us.
Psalm 46 is built around a strong contrast. On the one side, we have the turmoil and rage of the world and the nations. On the other, the quiet and stability of God and His city. The psalmist calls us to approach the dreadful chaos of our earthly existence with calm and fearlessness, finding refuge in the God of Jacob, who is both Lord of creation and of history. The psalm divides evenly into 3 stanzas plus a refrain, and the end of each stanza is marked with the word Selah, which probably means a musical interlude. The first stanza contrasts the stability of God with the chaos of the natural world. It displays a bold confidence in God, which allows us to face disaster without fear. The second stanza contrasts the stability of the city of God with the chaos of the nations of the world. And the third stanza describes how God will put an end to the chaos of nature and of the nations, and it calls for calm before the God who overcomes all disasters and all human evils. The first stanza declares that God is refuge, strength, and helper. He is the source of all security and deliverance from the things that we fear. Moreover, He is very readily found. That is, He is always responsive to those who call upon Him in trouble. The stanza goes on to describe massive upheaval and destruction in the natural world, drawing upon imagery of earthquakes and mudslides and tidal waves. Even the mountains, which are traditional symbols of stability, are not able to stand in the face of such destruction. The image is that of creation undone. In the original creation, God divided the waters above and the waters below. He separated the waters from the dry land. In the great flood, He allowed all these to mix chaotically again. However, even in the face of unimaginable natural disaster, this psalm teaches us to respond with fearlessness because of the God who is refuge, strength, and helper. And much like Noah and his family and all the animals had security in the midst of the flood, so the people of God have no fear in the face of calamity. The second stanza begins abruptly with the sudden introduction of a river. It just comes out of nowhere. This river stands in stark contrast with the roaring and foaming sea of the previous stanza. It's the difference between life-giving waters and deadly waters. The river is the defining feature of the city of God. This recalls the 4 rivers of the Garden of Eden, and also the river of life in the eschatological New Jerusalem. Life springs forth from the presence of God, and these life-giving waters make the city of God a place of quiet, joy, and stability. Here in stanza 2, the nations of the world act much like the natural disasters did in the first stanza. This is underlined by the repeated vocabulary. The nations roar in verse 6, just like the chaotic waters did in verse 3. And the kingdoms topple in verse 6 like the mountains did in verse 2. The human powers who are opposed to God are both sources of chaos and also the victims of the same. However, they are unable to overpower God and His city, and their defeat is sudden and anticlimactic as they are melted by the voice of God. This reminds me of what Martin Luther said in his great hymn, A Mighty Fortress, which is based loosely on Psalm 46. One little word can fell him. The third stanza draws together the themes of the previous 2 in an apocalyptic vision of deliverance. Where the first stanza addressed the chaos in the earth, and the second addressed the turmoil among the nations, this stanza shows God exalted over both. In the end, God destroys the forces of evil and puts an end to their works of chaos by removing their ability to make war. In the end, they only contribute toward the glory of God in Christ, to whom one day every knee shall bow. Now verse 10 which is traditionally translated, "Be still and know that I am God," presents a translational challenge, since the first word, "be still," could mean different things based upon the context. It could be read as a command to the warring nations. In this case, it means something like, "Cease fighting, give up, drop your weapons." Alternatively, it could be read as an invitation to the people of God. In that case, it'd be better translated as, "Be calm, let it go," or "hush." And probably this is intentional ambiguity. And the verb applies to both groups. It is simultaneously the voice of the one who calms the storms, saying, "Silence, be still," and the voice of the one who calms his disciples, saying, "Don't be afraid." It is the Lord of creation and of history, bringing the violence of nature and of humanity to an end. And it's the Prince of Peace, inviting his children to be people of peace. Finally, the refrain grounds our faith in the character of God. Even though there are very real disasters and dangers, the psalmist is confident because of who God is, and because God is with us. He is Yahweh of armies, a name which recalls both God's covenantal faithfulness and his power to save. He is also called the God of Jacob, which brings to mind the relationship between God and his people. He is the God who is with us. He is our fortress, the only source of security and hope. And we know this all the more vividly because God has revealed himself in his crucified and resurrected Son. Because of the character of our God, it is possible for us to also take up the words of this exceedingly bold psalm as our prayer. This psalm is most applicable when the turmoil and chaos of life is at its highest ebb. When we live in the unbearable tension of the human condition, this song may be used to calm the fears of God's people, reminding them where their only true security lies. God is the Lord of creation, and all the natural forces obey his commands. He is also the Lord of history, and he wields authority over all the nations of the earth. He is the God who reconciles all things to himself in Christ. His people can live in the confidence that he will ultimately bring an end to disaster and war. And while we wait for this blessed hope at the return of Jesus Christ, even now we have peace and security in our God. Finally, this psalm is also a call for God's people to stop contributing to the noise and the war and the anxiety of this world, but instead to be people of stillness, people who exude calm, people through whom God brings his perfect stillness to an anxious people in anxious times. I hope that you find peace and stillness as you listen to our song, Psalm 46, A River.
Let the waters rage, let the mountains tremble, let the whole earth shake. We will never stumble. We belong to the city of God. We belong to the city of God. Let the nations rage, let the kingdoms crumble, let the wars be waged. We will not be troubled. We belong to the city of God. We belong to the city of God. There is a river flowing. There is a river flowing. There is a river flowing down. Let the nations rage, let the kingdoms crumble, let the wars be waged. We will not be troubled. We belong to the city of God. We belong to the city of God. There is a river flowing. There is a river flowing. There is a river flowing down. Be still and know the Lord is eager to be found. He is our mighty fortress. Lay your weapons down. Be still and know the Lord is eager to be found. He is our mighty fortress. Lay your weapons down. Lay your weapons down. There is a river flowing. There is a river flowing. There is a river flowing down. Let the waters rage. Let the mountains tremble. Let the whole earth shake. We will never stumble. We belong to the city of God. We belong to the city of God. Let the nations